Greetings, Sumela, Sawubona, Sakpase, Namaste, Obshin, Dubra Otra, Assalamu alaikum, Hotep. Buenas noches, bonsoir. What's going on? Welcome, everyone, to this is season 2, episode 40. We made it. We made it to 40. I love even numbers. This is a special, so some of you may not catch this on the live, but I will be replaying this until Tuesday. Okay, until Tuesday. I want to make sure that you get out to vote and you get out to vote and make sure you flip it or you'll miss it. The person that has been spearheading this campaign over the last couple of days, if you have not been following the internet streets, is Jennifer Jones Austin, who's going to be joining us right now. If you know her, then you already know her bio. If you don't, you're going to hear a little bit about it right now, but let's bring her right on in person. Welcome, Jennifer, to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yay.
Really excited to be with you. You're always doing great things. And so to have the opportunity to be with you and to share tonight, especially with what's coming up Tuesday and people voting already, can't love you or thank you more.
Excellent. So you have been on like everything. You've been on IG, you've been on FB, you've been on the TikTok. You've been doing this literal song and dance about these 3 serious, but really 4 serious proposals that are on the opposite side of the ballot that most of us may not necessarily pay attention to. So I wanted you to get a little space, a little time to say why it is extremely important that we flip it or you'll miss it.
Flip it or you'll miss it. So for the first time in the city of New York, first time in the nation, racial justice and equity are on the ballot. And New Yorkers get to decide whether or not racial justice and equity become a part of New York City law. So, back in 2020, when George Floyd was killed, and then when Breonna Taylor was killed, people took to the streets and said, no more. No more racism when it comes to policing, no more excessive use of force by the police. They were demanding something more. And of course, we know that all of that was happening right at the same time that we were going through coronavirus, right? Corona.
The Rona. Y'all know.
Right? The Rona. COVID-19. And what were we seeing? We were seeing that Black and brown communities here in New York City and across the nation were being devastatingly impacted. We're suffering from COVID the most because of what we learned, everybody learned, were the social determinants of health, how poverty as a stressor, lack of access to quality health care, how lack of, sufficient levels of income, access to quality and healthy foods and fruits and vegetables, how lack of access to quality education causes people of color to struggle and to suffer, and how that then shows up in our health and our mental well-being, and how that can make us more susceptible to something like COVID-19. So the city, the nation is looking at this and appreciating that racism has birthed these social determinants of health. Racism is playing out in justice or lack of justice in policing. And New Yorkers and the nation at large, many people said, we can't be doing this anymore. We have to figure out what the solution is. So here's what happened in New York City. People who protested were heard. Their voices were heard. And the then mayor said, we need to do something about this. The then mayor, Bill de Blasio, he may not be everybody's choice and everybody doesn't love him, but he looked at these issues and said, you know what? Racism is not just a one-to-one relationship. It's not just happening, when it comes to policing. It pervades every pillar of our society. We see racism in education, in healthcare, in jobs and wages, in environmental issues. We see it in policing. We have to do something about it. So he stood up the Racial Justice Commission and he gave me a call and said, hey, will you lead this commission? Having done poverty fighting work, policy and advocacy work for now nearly 30 years, I have come to appreciate that anti-poverty policies and programs, essentially what they do is that, they follow that old adage, feed a man a fish, you feed him for a day. Right. Teach him how to fish, you feed him for a lifetime. But when we have policies and programs that are aimed at addressing poverty, the fact of the matter is they're really only doing this kind of one-off thing. They help individuals, but they don't change the systems that have birthed and perpetuated poverty. In order to fight the system, you've got to come at it at the root.
Correct.
Structural racism. Racism that is embedded in the laws of this land.
So wait, right. Let me interject just for a second. So when you said like get at the root, the real root is in people's minds, but people's minds impact how they shift and navigate through space. And in the shifting and navigating through space, they take this I'll use the word elitist like persona of I can walk down the block and make other people move, even though really we need to shift to give each other space on the street. I can walk, I can be in stores and like just demand to skip somebody in line when really you're probably tumbling over an elder. You know, I can demand a seat on the bus back in the day, demand a seat on the bus and be like, well, you know, but hello, no more, right? So this right, there's mind and then there's policy.
Those attitudes, those beliefs,
right?
We like it, you're not born with them,
right?
But you're conditioned to believe that people who have privilege because of the color of their skin have been privileged. They've been birthed and conditioned to believe that they are better than, that they can. And here's what has happened in this nation. That belief, that value system has been embedded in the law. So the founding fathers, right? Or let's even go back before that, the beginning of slavery, this conditioning, and let's just put out here, a lot of this is religious based. It was the Christian religion that essentially saw God as a racist and tried to tell people God's a racist, and he has determined that certain people on the basis of their skin color are to be forever indentured servants. They essentially, it was the Christian religion that was essentially put forth by the white slave master, who was the preacher or the deacon on Sunday morning, who said that God is a racist and said, you know what? People who have a darker hue are less than. And then it was the black church essentially that came along and said, oh, no. We need a different, we need to understand religion differently and Christ differently. And the reason that the black church was birthed was because our black ancestors said, that's not the God in the gospel.
That's not the theology that I know.
That is not the theology that I know. Our God is not a racist. And so the black church was created to say, that is antithetical to the teachings of Christ, and we're not going to stand for it. But the laws never changed. Here's the deal. Constitution did not include persons of color. We the people was not about we, you, and me, our brothers and our sisters, right? The Constitution said that persons who were enslaved, persons of African descent, were 3/5 persons. So what the laws did was they took that mind, that mindset, that value base, and that conditioning, and they planted it in the laws. And then what happened was structures, systems were then built on top of those laws, essentially perpetuating racism. So much that we've seen it even in recent days. I always think about sentencing. Remember when crack cocaine was just running rampant through our communities? You know what the law said? The law said that if you had one vial of crack, you would serve the same sentence as someone with 100 ounces of powder cocaine.
Right.
Now, who had 100 ounces of powder cocaine?
Sorry, that's not funny. That's not funny at all.
Not people in my community.
Now, just for the record, now those of you who are here, thank you so much, because already people are starting to share. And if you have questions or comments, please drop in the comments, and then we'll definitely put them up on the screen and we'll share them. So just as an FYI, Jennifer and I are from Flatbush. We are from Brooklyn. We are Brooklyn girls. And so in our community, no, we didn't roll with that. That stuff was brought into the community. It was brought in.
Absolutely.
Not to say we could afford everything, but we wasn't affording 100 pounds, 100 ounces. No.
But the government knew that.
Correct.
And so that's why they set these levels. Those who don't look like us, who may have had 100 ounces of powder cocaine, they probably weren't walking around with them the same way somebody may have had one vial of crack.
No. They weren't. Right? They weren't standing on the corner. They weren't. No.
Mm-mm.
They weren't
Wasn't
working
happening.
the same. They weren't working in the same, let's say 24, 36, 48 floor building. No, they
No,
weren't
wasn't happening.
driving. They weren't on the bus. They weren't on the train. They was riding four wheels on their own that they had a registration for. I'm just
Absolutely.
saying.
And that was literally, we're just talking about like a little better than a decade ago
Right.
that law was on the books. So structural racism is embedded in the laws. It's allowed, it has been permissible. And when Mayor de Blasio created this commission, he said, I want this commission to go into the New York City Charter, which
Excellent.
is the New York City Constitution, and look at how we begin to dismantle structural racism. Here's what I want people to appreciate. You know, we were taught that racism was like a one-to-one relationship. Your teacher didn't like you, or your child's teacher didn't like your child because your child was of color. Or your neighbor, maybe you lived in an integrated neighborhood and the neighbor didn't like the fact that the neighbor had to live next door to you,
Hmm.
right? Or maybe you were getting on the bus and they were looking at you like, why do you
Why are
think
you
you get
here?
to, why are you here, right? Or even when you were just walking through your own neighborhood, why are you here? Who let you in?
Right. Whose
Right?
house you
So
live in?
we were led to believe that it was one to one. But really what happened was racism was a tool, an effective tool to uphold an unjust capitalist structure.
Yeah.
And if you understand that, then you understand why racism was baked into the laws. Because if the laws were allowing for discrimination, were allowing for some people to have and others not have, then that allowed our capitalist society to stand up. And it would just by design, without even really people having to do anything, it would just kind of just roll over and reproduce generation after generation after generation. So, commission gets stood up, 11 commissioners from all across New York City, all people of color. We go into the charter and we start talking to New Yorkers all around the city. We talked to better than 3,000 people, and they shared with us their daily lived experiences. People talk to us about, what we all know, excessive use of force and policing. People talk to us about calling the police because they had a problem in their community. The police roll up, the car rolls up, police jump out, and they start looking at them like they're the ones with the problem when they're the ones who called the police in the first place. We heard people talk about how they were starting businesses, Black and brown people, but they could not get government capital to help them build their businesses. But people who looked just like them and had the same, had the same, what do you call it, credit scores, were able to get loans from the city. We heard
Right.
people
For
talk
that
about
and housing
working
as well.
housing. We heard people
Right.
talk about how, this is one that's going to trip you out. Black and brown women were telling us that they were working in the government, getting high level performance reviews, and being passed over for raises and promotions. And
Hmm.
just 2 weeks ago, the city of New York had to settle a lawsuit brought by Black and brown people that showed that the Department of Citywide Administrative Services was allowing for overtime. But who was getting the overtime? White people. And Black and brown people were being looked over. This
That
was just
doesn't
two
trip
weeks
me
ago that
out.
was
I'm just right. That doesn't trip me out. I'm just glad that somebody or some groups of people decided to say enough is enough. Let me get the other people who I know it happens to. Let's get together and let's like push the envelope. Like let's push the envelope. Let's make
absolutely
this.
had to
So
do it.
right. So the fact that this is quote unquote on the books now, because some people might think, okay, it's with a pen stroke, we're going to have a 180. We're not going to have a 180. But the fact that it's on the books now provides people the opportunity to
Well,
say,
remember, it's on the ballot.
right, it's on the ballot. Right.
If
So I'm
people vote
presuming
for it,
that we're going to put it on the books. I'm presuming we're
right?
going to do that.
Look, hey, this New Yorker here, I am prayerful. I am hopeful. I believe that faith without works is dead. I trust God. I'm gonna do my part. I'm sorry, I got to get a little preachy up in here, get a little religious, because that's just how I move through the world.
That's why I'm doing like this, because I feel like I'm in church.
But here's the deal: we've got an opportunity to effect real change. Never before has racial justice been in the laws of our society. We've got 3 proposals, And New Yorkers get to vote on them individually or they get to vote on all three. The first proposal would do just what I'm talking about. It would put us in the New York City Constitution. When these constitutions were created across the nation, city, state, and federal constitution, they weren't thinking about us. We would have, for the first time, we would be in the New York City Charter. The New York City Charter would have a proposal. This is the first proposal. If it's voted for by New Yorkers, it would establish a preamble, a statement of values for New York that says we're a multiracial democracy where every person, regardless of their race, their religion, their identities, who they love, they have a right to be treated like every other New Yorker. They have a right to the same opportunities that New York City holds for every New Yorker, regardless of where they live, regardless of their race. You talked about this, the values, the beliefs. This would say, New York, we believe we're a multiracial democracy, and everybody should have opportunity. That would be the first proposal. Should New Yorkers vote for it, it becomes law. The second proposal would establish in perpetuity, forever, under the New York City Constitution, the New York City Charter, an Office of Racial Equity, which has the responsibility of working with every city agency, every mayoral office to develop racial equity and justice plans. And it would do so using data, looking at the experiences of people in Flatbush, the experiences of people in parts of Bed-Stuy, Brownsville, parts of the Bronx, parts of Queens that predominantly have people of color who've been marginalized, who've been oppressed, who've been denied real opportunity. It would look at the data and then it would compare it to the data in more affluent communities, which here in New York City are usually and are predominantly white, and say, okay, what do we need to do to ensure equity across the board? The schools in the predominantly white communities are doing better. Now, what do we need to do to improve the schools in the predominantly Black and brown and even Asian communities?
Right. So I have a question about that. And this is, it may seem like minutia, but it's just something that I'm aware of. So we can have a commission, we can have an office of racial equity. And those people who are watching this, I'm taking notes. So that's why sometimes I actually may be on mute because I don't want to type while she's talking. But when you have an office or a commission of racial equity, that means there's people that when you have a complaint, it's not falling on deaf ears or it's at the bottom of the pile, right? Or it's in the bottom of the file cabinet.
That's right.
It's going to go to a group of people. Here's my question. Who is going to, you don't know this answer right now, but who is going to be on that commission? Are they representative?
Yes.
Of our communities? What training do they have? Are they born and raised, or at least born, or raised in our communities, that they are actually representative? Not somebody, no slight to people who live outside of the 5 boroughs, but I'm Brooklyn born and bred, so I'm always going to represent Brooklyn. But are they from the communities of like a Bed-Stuy, East New York, Brownsville, Flatbush, Crown Heights, or of like South Bronx, or South Jamaica?
Yes.
So that's what I want to know. And what training do they have in either social justice or racial equity or the other isms that are needed, so that when this comes across their desk, someone says, oh, no, that's like a level 1. Like, we need to address that right now. Or, you know what, that's a level 2. Let me make a phone call. Let me go to someone who's in the local CBO and try to, pause that and let people know that. Like, that's what I want to know. Because if it's sitting up, with someone who's like, well, sure, and okay. No, I want to know
this is how it's going to work.
Represent us.
There's a commissioner right now for the Office of Equity. Our current mayor, Mayor Adams, created this office, but it's only established by executive order. Right. So when he leaves office, or if he, for whatever reason, determined that he no longer wanted it, it could just be done away with.
That's right.
This office would live in perpetuity. It would become part of the law. There would be a chief equity officer. That person would be selected by the mayor, but the city council needs to weigh in. There would be a commission of New Yorkers with lived experience. I'm talking about, I may have experience, but we want people who are every single day facing these hardships, every single day in our communities. They would receive a stipend to sit on this commission, to hold New York City accountable. There would be staff that works directly with them. We're talking about an office probably of about 60 people. It's estimated to be about 60 people who would be working with every city agency to make sure that their plans are looking at the data. There would be trainings of all of the officers working with every city agency to make sure that we're looking at racial equity, not just by how we design a program or how we design a policy, but how is it by design, implementation, and impact affecting New Yorkers. Here's an example that I can provide for you. Some people like to think that when we had the GI Bill that disproportionately benefited white veterans over Black veterans, that there was no racial, racism or racialized intent there. But we knew that because of discrimination with the GI Bill that allowed for those who were returning from war to go to college tuition free, to buy houses with 0% down, that discrimination was still in place at the time. Discrimination was still legal. So Black persons could not take advantage of that law, those benefits at the same rate and level as white persons could. At face, it appeared race neutral, but in implementation and impact, it was discriminatory. We would be working with and training people to understand how to look at these issues through a racial and gender equity frame and the other related intersectionalities. And the city council working with the mayor would be appointing these commission members. And so we would have a say through our city council and through our mayor as to who gets to sit in these seats.
Okay. All right.
Now we got a third proposal.
Here we go. Proposal number 3. Let's go.
This third proposal, let me tell you something. When I shared with the people in the White House that this was on the ballot, eyes got bug-eyed. Wide as saucers, like, what? And here's why. The third proposal would establish a true cost of living measurement for the city. It would require our government to annually calculate what it truly costs to live here in New York City. Now, why is this important? Why is it significant? Because here in America, no matter where you live, whether it's Decatur, Georgia, or Wichita, Kansas, San Francisco, California, or Queens, New York, there is a federal poverty measure that is used to help set wages and to determine who is eligible for critical supports like childcare, supports like housing, supports including food supports, food stamps, right. Supports including transportation, Medicaid. And that federal poverty measure is dated, it's outdated, it's antiquated. It says that for one adult and 2 children living anywhere in America, you need only have a gross income of $22,000
right.
to not be poor.
Right.
$22,000. 3 people, $22,000. Now, I don't know anywhere in America where one person, let alone 3, can live on $22,000. And certainly not here in New York City. There's something called the self-sufficiency standard, which says that one adult and 2 children living in the Bronx needs at least $85,000 to cover all of their expenses.
Sounds about right.
Sounds about right,
Sounds
right?
About right.
And so if we calculate the true cost of living, we now have data that helps inform government when we set policy around what is a fair and livable wage, when we set policy around critical supports, eligibility for a child care subsidy, right. Eligibility for a housing subsidy. We now have information that helps us to appreciate what it costs for New Yorkers to not just get by, but to actually get ahead. And why is this have a racial element? Because we know that poverty is not discriminatory. But what we also know is that Black and brown persons, and especially Black and brown women, are paid far less than their worth. Black and brown women are paid on average 64 cents and 56 cents right. respectively to what a white man earns, even when they have college and master's degrees. We need to measure the true cost of living. So these proposals are on the ballot. They only become law, Doriel, if a simple majority of New Yorkers vote for them, meaning one more New Yorker versus one fewer New Yorker votes for them. So every single vote matters. And I'm going to tell you, there are some people out here who are banking that during the midterm elections, when we see very often that not many people come out to vote, and especially people, our people in our communities, there are people who are essentially banking on people not showing up and voting for these proposals. They only pass if New Yorkers vote for them.
Got it. Got it. So that's why flip it or you'll miss it. Flip it or you'll miss it. I'm very encouraged about this. I'm moved that this particular midterm voting period it's almost it almost I don't know. I'm just gonna say it almost feels like let's put it in midterm so because we know that people are not going to show up. I just know that's probably not what's really happening. But to people who only vote like in the presidential election, right? Or like the big ones, they're like, oh, that doesn't matter. It's not going to be. Nah, flip it.
Yeah.
We'll show up. Flip it.
Flip it.
Right. And so I wanted to have this conversation because here it is. We're at the last moment of early voting. I've been to some of the poll sites and heard from people, oh well, like on the first day a lot of people showed up and they were there and then kind of petered off. If people are waiting for actual election day, then we already know the conversations about voter suppression. We already know about you can stand on the line, but people, other talk shows have shared this. You can't even bring like water or something like that to people standing on the line, or you have to have this data and that data in order to make sure that you get there. And if you don't, you're going to be turned away. Like, we already know that. Right. We already know that. We've been through that for the last 8 to 10 years. Don't let that be the excuse that you don't have a commission to represent the and I'm talking to New York City folks, because I have people who watch from all over. But New York, please show up. Please show up.
And here's the deal. If New York does it, we could start a movement.
We're gonna start a movement. We're gonna start a movement. That's because New York sets the bar high, right? We set the stage. We are the forerunners. If it happens in New York, it can happen in other places.
If I can make it here, I can make it anywhere.
Right.
If it can be done here, it can be done anywhere.
That's right. And, not that New York is the only place that these issues are paramount. They're not. It just so happens that because we have so many people, all of those issues about, and we can't forget the clean water, right? The clean water, clean air.
Right. That's
as well.
And that's about opportunity and equity as well, because we know that in our communities, we suffer the most from climate change. Pollutants in the air, higher flooding. And so what the first proposal that you'll see when you flip the ballot, it's all about establishing a bond, allowing New York State to raise $4.2 billion in bonds. Now, that's not more taxes. People just need to understand that. That means that New York can actually issue bonds. People can purchase bonds, which are essentially like, loaning New York State government some money to actually build a new infrastructure to ensure that we have clean water and also to begin to address the pollutants in the air.
So just a question about the bonds. Is this like I can go to the bank and...
That's a good question. I'm not really sure how it will work.
Okay.
When the government issues bonds, they usually work with municipalities, and that sometimes they work through banks to do it. And so it may work that way, but I'm not sure what the structure is for it just yet.
Not a problem. So I'm very, very excited to have this again on our ballots and for us to have a say that, yes, when I have a complaint, when somebody's, knocking on my door and banging down my door, but it's really, you're not at my door, you're at somebody else's door. You're supposed to be at somebody else's door, or things are flying through my window and I'm like the wrong target. But then you think that I'm the person that started the mess. I'm the victim. I'm sitting watching my television. Right? Or if it's, excuse me, if it's an issue of I'm trying to get a loan for a home. I'm trying to open up a business, even if it's the old fashioned mom and pop shop, or if it's a brick and mortar, or if it's a service based, or, if it's a product based business.
Right. Or even if it's why are they not closing the potholes on my street in my community.
Right, right. I'm in where I live. I noticed. I said, well, why in the world are these streets being closed and it's not a movie? Because where I live, there's always movies being filmed. So I almost twice a month I never have parking.
Yep.
But they were tearing up the corner, and I stopped the person one day because it was 4 days later and I still didn't have any parking. I said, hi, sir, can you tell me what's going on? He goes, oh, we're repairing the sidewalks in the corner. And I said, who orchestrated that? And he said, well, it could be that somebody fell and there's a lawsuit. It could be that somebody just called and said, we need to have this fixed. So I said, could those people be the homeowners? And he said, that's probably how it works. I said, oh. So then I looked up and down the block. I said, okay, what do we got to do to have it happen on the other street where there aren't these, century-old homes? So what do we got to wait for? Somebody to break their neck?
That's right.
So just knowing about that and just knowing how certain zip codes, certain, nooks, of neighborhoods get more attention than others. But how do we do that? If you're a part of the neighborhood that you feel doesn't get representation, then go to your local neighborhood meetings.
But see, we'll start to see with the disaggregated data what that's looking like, community by community, if we have this Office of Racial Equity.
Correct. I'm very proud. I'm excited. I'm enthralled. I really pray that people are going to come out, not just vote, but we're not flipping pancakes, flipping the ballot. Okay.
Flip it or you'll miss it.
Flip it or you'll miss it. Thank you so much, Jennifer. Thank you so much for all the work that you do in the places and spaces that you show up. The podium.
Got all the glory.
That's right. The podiums, the pulpits, the platforms that you show up on, and that you share this work of racial justice, of social equity, of equity across racial lines, gender lines, the spiritual and religious lines, economic lines.
That's right.
Thanks for being the banner holder. We love you dearly.
Love you.
So people, if you're still watching, which I know you are, I see people running through the comments, please share this out. Please remind your neighbors, your family and them, your elders, your children, those who are over 18 and who are registered to vote. Get out. Please do not make complaints and don't have a commitment to change. And that commitment begins not just with people's minds. Yes, it does begin with people's minds, but it continues through legislation. And that's what we want. We want legislation. It's not going to fix everything, but it's going to start. So then if something does jump off, we can say, hello, there's an office that's going to address that. And that's what, thank you. Oh, hold on. We have another comment. Thank you. You needed the proposals explained further. I really do hope that you had the proposals explained. Thank you so much. So any further information that you need, please go. Even if you just type in proposals on the ballot, you'll have a huge floodgate of information, of which I copied and pasted in our intro. And so I hope you can look at it. If you have other questions, though, contact your local elected official because they know it. They know it. Your assembly person, your city council person, your congressperson. If you have a connection, if you don't have a connection, please go find their office. It's probably right in your neighborhood. Go call them up, slide by and say, excuse me, can you explain this? They will do it because they want you to support it. All right. That is it. I love you all. I look forward to seeing you on our regularly scheduled programming day, which is on Monday nights at 7 p.m. Please stay connected to us on YouTube and on Facebook. We are always welcoming people who are inspirational leaders in the community to thank you. Oh, wait, we have somebody that you know. Thank you. We appreciate you. I know.
That's my big sister.
That's right. Hey, Elsa. We really appreciate you stopping by and considering it not robbery to show up on this platform right here in order to spread the word and get people to do what? Flip it or you'll miss it. God bless everyone. I'll see you guys on Monday night.